Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Invest in Our New York event, which is co-sponsored by Peace Action of Staten Island and Staten Island Women Who March. Today, we're going to be learning about the Invest in Our New York campaign and the Invest in Our New York Act, which is a package that would raise $50 billion to invest in healthcare, housing, education, and jobs. How? By taxing the wealthy, taxing the rich. Stephanie Ward of Staten Island Women Who March will be our facilitator today, and we will also be joined by Nick Leiden from Invest in Our New York campaign. But before we start, I also want to thank these sponsors, the co-sponsors for our event today. The event that you're going to participate in today is a result of the work of the board. We meet once a month. We create a calendar of events that reflect the mission of Peace Action and the needs of our community. The board brings their experience, their know-how, their connections to the table to make Posse a force for change in our community. So it's a very important work, and I thank everybody on the board, and I thank people who, have volunteered to be on our new board that will come into effect in June. So if anyone is interested in attending our meeting, we meet the third Wednesday of every month. You can just email me, Eileen Bardell, 1L, at yahoo.com, and then we'll get the information to you. Okay, so with that done, we'll move on. Please mark your calendar for our next event on April 17th at 2 p.m. Information on the event will be sent to you. March 19th marks the 18th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq. And every year in mid-April, there was a global day of action on military spending. And our current military budget is $740 billion. Imagine all the money that has been spent on war allocated to this budget if it was invested in human services. Also, there is a Move the Money campaign, which is a coalition of about 60 community groups, peace, labor, civil rights, tenants, and what they're trying to do is have the city council pass a resolution, 747A, which would have money moved from the Pentagon budget to human services. So what can you do? You can call Speaker Corey Johnson, urge him to vote for it, and to get the other members. Because we all know that the money that's on war and munitions and defense contractors is money that we need in our cities to help people. So without further ado, unless anybody has any announcements they wanted to make or anything else that they'd like to offer, I'm going to introduce Stephanie Ward, who is with Staten Island Women Who March. She is part of the New York campaign, and she is going to facilitate this meeting today. So Stephanie, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. And I really do, again, just want to thank Peace Action Staten Island. You've really jumped on board with this, and it's been really great having you as a partner with this for the last, month or so. And I do want to thank all the other organizations that, are co-sponsors of this event as well. None of this work on Staten Island would be possible without everybody here that's participating and showing up. So I just want to start off by saying a big thank you for you all here. So I'm going to share my screen. And as was mentioned at the top of the meeting, if you have any questions as we're going along, you can definitely put them in the chat. I am here with another partner in this coalition, Nick Linden. He'll be able to, help field some questions in the chat as we're going along. So the Invest in Our New York campaign is what I'm here to talk to you about today. And as mentioned at the top, this is really a campaign that is meant to properly tax the wealthiest in our state in a way that will help fund our future and create a New York where we can all prosper. So for those of you who may not know me or may not know Staten Island Women Who March, we're a grassroots group that's dedicated to advancing the interests of women and other underrepresented communities here on Staten Island through civic engagement and social action. Our goal is to improve the social and political landscape of Staten Island to one that is consciously supportive, well-informed, and inclusive. You can email me at stephanie@swim.org if you have any questions. I am one of the core leaders of SWIM. I'm the member engagement director. So we're always looking to hear from people here in Staten Island about what they would like to see more from, and specifically from SWIM. So definitely feel free to reach out to me if you have any thoughts or questions about SWIM and how to get involved in SWIM. And you can check out our website at www.swim.org as well to learn a little bit more about what we do. But again, I'm here today representing SWIM as part of the Invest in Our New York coalition. So to just talk a little bit about this coalition, it's formed with over 100 grassroots organizations, labor and community organizations that have all joined together to really push and support this act, these package of bills that would rebuild our economy and end tax break from the wealthiest. Organizations like Vocal New York and Working Families Party, Indivisible, and Make the Road, they're all part of these partners, along with many, many others here, including now Peace Action of Staten Island too. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, this situation, what brings me here today, and where we are. So as we all know, we've been hit really hard with the pandemic, not just as far as, you know, the human toll of it, but the economic toll of it. Okay.
That was interesting.
I don't know if maybe is everybody
Sometimes
else?
if everybody turns off their microphone, it helps.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, thanks. I'm going to keep moving along. So we didn't get where we are here overnight. It's decades of disinvestment in New York, which led to the worst inequality of any state in our country. And as state governments paid for less and less, counties have been forced to, you know, cut services while scrambling to cover what they can through local property sales and other taxes. And as we all know, like, that always puts the heaviest burden on the people who are in the position that's like worst to be able to sustain all of us. It lands on working families, it lands on, you know, poor folks in our community. And COVID-19 has made all of this worse, as everybody here is well aware of. It's made it worse for all except the wealthiest. We know that Black and Brown communities have been hit the hardest by this, and that's where we really need to start showing up. And this situation is just keep getting worse. You know, the governor, Cuomo was already planning to cut billions from Medicaid before the pandemic. And he really used this crisis to gain power to make, you know, unilateral budget cuts. The amount of power that Governor Cuomo has already as far as making, you know, budget decisions has just grown during this pandemic. He's already withheld, like in the beginning, he's talked about really trying not to make cuts to things, but he was essentially doing that by withholding around $8 billion in local aid. Teachers have lost their jobs. Nonprofit service providers have been forced to shut down, especially and during this time where they're really like needed the most. And then meanwhile, the state itself faces, you know, billions of dollars of deficit over the next 4 years. And we really haven't been doing enough here in the state. Most of last year was spent with like waiting to hear what we were going to be getting from the federal government, and it just wasn't ever going to be enough. So instead of taking this opportunity to create change, it was just really used as like putting a Band-Aid over and over again throughout the year. And as a result, 2.5 million New Yorkers are currently unemployed. Over 1.2 million have lost health insurance during this pandemic. And so many more are facing food insecurity, homelessness is surging, and everything else that we still need to keep everything moving and to keep our environment safe has been going unfunded. We, you know, our local, you know, communities are already being, you know, forced to shoulder more than we can manage. and being forced to tack and slash to the breaking point. And the scale of what we need is enormous. All of these things that are listed here, as far as like canceling rent, public schools, housing, Green New Deal, healthcare, excluded workers fund, and higher education, all of these numbers that are listed here are really just the bare minimum of basic needs that we're going to be needing to figure out a way to fund and support. But the reality is that here in New York, the money is here. The money is here to support everybody here, to help us through this economic crisis, and not just to get us through this moment, but to really set us up for a really more equitable future for all New Yorkers. New York metro area has the largest economy in the US. In 2019, New York itself, its GDP was $1.8 trillion. And I know that $1.89 trillion number is sounding very familiar these days, but know that like in 2019, that was us. New York is the 10th largest economy in the world. The world, not just the United States, the world. So you might be asking yourself, like, where is all of this money? Why aren't we seeing it? Why is the inequality so high? Why are, programs getting cut? And it's because the rich in our state are hoarding our economic growth. In the post-war period, income growth for all was roughly equal. By the period of 2009 to 2015, the top 1% has captured over 50% of all income growth. This is just like kind of another graph that kind of shows this growth of just how like the rich just keep getting richer. And while there has been some, increase in other groups and demographics, it's just not at the pace. And that's what's causing the gap to just get bigger and bigger as time goes on. And the way that our current tax structure is built, it still favors the wealthy. The top 1% of New Yorkers have the lowest tax burden of all. And the bailouts just keep coming, and to the financial industry and corporate interests, they're still receiving the tax breaks when it's really the people who put their money back into the economy that are struggling the most and are getting hit hardest with all of the taxes. So here we are. Now is the time. This is the time to tax the ultra rich. This is a moment that has been a long time coming, and we're in a place now where everything has been laid bare. All of the inequalities have been laid bare. All of the inequities have been laid bare. So this is really the time for progressive legislation to really get through, and it's being reflected by the people who are being elected to lead New York. Progressive legislative candidates across New York won decisive victories, which is a reflection of the times that are changing. And like for the first time, elected officials are currently acknowledging the need to increase revenue, though not quite yet at the scale that we need it to be. And we have a supermajority in both chambers that gives the legislative the power to override Cuomo's veto. So this is really the time, and that's reflected in the people. 90% of New Yorkers across parties favor taxing the rich before cutting public services. This is a big number. This is not partisan. Like, this is an issue that is one of the few things that seem to unite people these days. Hang on one second. I'm just going to mute my other line. Okay. I'm just going to let that go, and we're going to keep on going. So principles for meeting the moment. We need tax cuts currently that are well formulated, progressive, and place a heavier burden on those who can afford it most. And we can generate significant revenue by doing this. So what is the Invest in Our New York Act? It's 6 bills to raise $50 to $75 billion annually. And I really want us to hear that annually, because it's going to become important as we continue talking. This is not an act that is just a one-time moment. This is to help us year over year to get to a more equitable New York. And the 6 bills that are going to do that are broken down to 3 types of major reforms. It's looking at taxing high incomes, taxing wealth, and then taxing big business and the financial sector. And as we mentioned, like all of this really estimates these different bills combined can raise, up to $75 billion annually. So we're going to go through each bill a little bit. We may not go into too much detail for all of them, but just to kind of talk through what these bills are. So this first bill would create a progressive income tax system. So instead of a progressive tax system, New York currently has what pretty much amounts to a regressive flat tax. Our tax structure is calibrated to a time in which $20,000 was a very high salary and $1 million salaries were unheard of. As a result, high earners have been getting an income tax break for decades. So just to kind of like look through what that looks like, this is sort of a representation of how our tax rate sort of looks right now. And while it's like we're saying it's currently a flat tax, again, it's almost regressive in the way that it was built and when it was built. We haven't updated it enough. This bill would create a truly progressive income tax. And again, it's really impacting those the most. You'll see that it starts to incline at around 300,000 for single filers. So again, it's really not taking into effect or impacting those that really aren't in a position to hold this burden for this. And this is just like another reflection of what this increase would look like in practice for a year. The proposal is what's in red and the blue is the current. So again, like you'll see that it's just really reflecting who can afford to take a little bit more on as far as this budget goes and this tax rate. Bill number 2 is to tax the investment income the same as wages. So income is income, whether you're getting it through your paycheck or through investments that you make. And currently we're not taxing investment income in a way that is really equitable and fair. So more people make much of their income from investments and not wages. This income is called capital gains. The federal government taxes capital gains at a much lower rate than wage income. New York can add a tax to capital gains that's equal to the federal tax break the rich are getting right now. And how this kind of looks in practice, again, this will only affect the wealthy. And it will be balanced out too with what's happening at the federal level. So if President Biden increases what the federal level tax is for this would be flexible and would adjust to it. So we're not necessarily overtaxing anybody with capital gains. So I think that's a really important thing and a really smart piece of this legislation. We're going to move over to bill number 3, which creates a meaningful inheritance tax. Large inheritances are unearned income that pool billions into the hands of people who didn't earn it, don't need it, and don't use it productively. They're not putting it back into this economy. Currently, you can inherit $5 million, which is all unearned income and pay no taxes to it. It would be much better if we use the economy to use the money to pay for infrastructure, healthcare, education, and housing, things that impact so many New Yorkers. And I think it's really important to know, again, I'm going to say this over and over again, that this plan only affects those who can afford it. 80% of New Yorkers never receive an inheritance. Of those that do, 99% receive one that's less than 200K. Inheritances below 250K are exempt from this tax, and the rates stay low. So 500K in inheritance will pay 2.5% until you start to get to the millions. And that's when the taxes really start to, the percentages really increase to make the most out of those inheritances. Important to note that pensions and retirement funds are exempt, as are primary residences and family farms. So no one will have to sell a family home, a family farm, or a family business to pay this tax. This is the most progressive tax in the package, only targeting those who can most afford it. And it's really important to note here too that this isn't a groundbreaking inheritance tax. Like this is modeled from other states who are already doing this work. Bill number 4. So I know I'm going through these pretty quickly, but I'm sure that Nick has things covered in the chat if questions are popping up. So I'm just going to keep moving along since I can't really see the chat right now. Bill number 4 would amend New York's constitution to allow for a wealth tax. So New York already has a wealth tax that's in practice. It's called a property tax. And here on Staten Island, we are very well aware of this, and homeowners pay it every year. Yet a stock portfolio is considered intangible property. And under the state constitution currently, it can't be taxed. Our bill will amend New York's constitution to allow assessments for intangible property. So it's a true wealth tax. Bill number 5 would reinstitute a financial transactions tax. So New York's become the largest industry. Finance here has become the largest industry in New York. We pay sales tax on a candy bar, but Goldman Sachs pays no sales tax on the stocks it buys. Financial centers like London and Hong Kong put a tax on financial transactions. And this also isn't groundbreaking because we did it here in New York State until 1980. This bill places a small tax on trades of stocks, bonds, and derivatives. I haven't been calling this out, but you'll see at the bottom of these slides that the revenue estimate of the particular bills is noted at the bottom too. And then bill number 6 would offset Trump's corporate tax cuts. So as we all know, in 2017, Trump tax cuts reduced the federal corporate income tax rate by 1/3. These and other breaks were made to benefit businesses like Trump's rather than grow the economy for all of us. New York can offset these cuts so that businesses pay the same amount as they did 3 years ago. So those are the bills. Again, I know that I went through this really fast. There'll be time for questions at the end too, if anything didn't get covered in the chat. I also should have said this in the beginning, but Nick and I, we are not tax experts. We are supporters of these bills. We are knowledgeable on these bills, but if we're getting into like real tax law type stuff, you can ask us questions and we'll be able to get you answers later on. Together, these 6 bills, again, will raise $50 to $75 billion annually. I'm going to keep hitting home that annually part of this. So where we are right now, we can do this and we really must do this. This is the best political context that we've had in decades to fixing this budget and securing our economy. And these reforms are common sense. The top 5% have been receiving tax breaks for decades and are really thriving in this current crisis. There's no plan B. We either fix this now or there's really no hope for long-term recovery. I don't think I've mentioned it yet so far here, but during this pandemic, the wealthiest in our state have increased their wealth by $87 billion. $87 billion, while more New Yorkers are facing homelessness, are facing food insecurity than they have in a very, very long time. So how can we win? We organize and we activate. So this is just kind of a little bit of an update of where we are in this campaign currently. So the letter writing campaign, this has happened, it's over at this point, but as a coalition, we sent around 20,000 letters to fellow New Yorkers to inform them of this act, to try and build some, power within our communities. And the kind of instruction and call to action in those letters was to have them be familiarized with it and then push them to call their state representatives to get on board with this. So again, this part of the campaign has already passed, but this is what we've been doing and we've been working on over the last 2 or 3 months. Phone banking and phone calls. So similar to the letter writing, there's been phone bankings that have been happening where you're calling, fellow New Yorkers to inform them of this act, give them the tools that they need to be able to speak to this act, and then really patch them straight through to their elected officials to ask them to support these bills. We're also in a phase of phone banking currently too, where we are targeting, it's going back and forth between targeting your local leaders and then also targeting the leaders, the House, the Senate and Assembly leaders to really push this and make sure that, really push this to become part of the Budget One House resolutions. And then we're also in a phase where we're continuing to call and email our state reps. There's still time to join this coalition. This is not going to be over anytime soon. And I think it's really important too to kind of level set too of where we are in the budget process currently in New York State. So the budget really starts to get put into action like this. The past month has really been when conferences are happening within the representative groups. They're talking about what they want to put in the one House budget resolution. So I know I keep saying one House budget resolution. The Senate has one and the Assembly has one themselves. And what these really are, these are like kind of them showing what they want to see in the budget that Cuomo would eventually approve. Like this is the Senate and the Assembly saying what they think is important, what they think they can do, what they want to do. So that's why it's been important to have, constituents be calling and like getting in their ear saying like, this is what we need. This is what we need now. This is the time to do it. Where we are is that I believe the Senate has potentially already completed. I don't think it's public yet, their one House budget. And then on Monday, the Assembly is putting together their plan and potentially having that go out early next week. So that's kind of where we are in the budget. And then the final budget process really kind of gets closed in April, at the top of April. So this next month, we're not taking our foot off the gas, but what the asks and actions might change as we go along. But there are things that you can do right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second and put all of these links in the chat too, so that you could take some of these actions as we're talking here right now. So I'm just going to copy and paste a few things here, and then I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and talk through some of these actions. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so one of the things that you can do right now, if you've have been listening along today and you feel like you are on board with this act, you can click on the investinournewyork.org link, and you can sign a petition right now that says like you want this to happen, you want these bills to get passed. The other thing that you can do is you can call and email your state reps and leaders to support. So within that Invest in Our New York website, this also too, just so you know, like after you fill in the petition, if you keep scrolling down, you're gonna see a lot of the information that I shared today. So if you wanna like sit with this information a little bit longer, take the time and like read through some of these things a bit more, you can definitely do that. And all of the information that you need is there. Within that site too, there's a investinournewyork.org/take action link that's also in the chat. And this really shows you like all different ways that you can get involved as an individual and do what you feel comfortable doing in this moment. Within that, there's going to be a section where you can click a link that would take you to calling or emailing your state representative. So I'm just going to skip really quick to the next slide to show you what that would look like. This coalition is super organized. They keep these messages updated and these calls to action updated too. So like you can check back in multiple times and keep calling and keep reaching out to your state representatives. And this also gets updated, this site itself, to prioritize where we are in the campaign. So like if we're in a phase where we're really supposed to be putting more pressure on the leaders, Andrew Stewart Cousins and Carl Heastie, to get these things on the floor, to be talking about these, to be prioritizing these messages, this site will update that so that you're syncing up whenever you sign on to call or to email. It's going to be providing you with the script of what you would say on a phone call, who you would be calling, and the email is pretty much almost already populated for you. Like there would just be some tweaks that you would make to personalize it a little bit. You can update it, you can add your own stories, anything that this budget would really help you in your own personal life, you can include that in here too. And it'll send this straight to your representatives, it'll send this straight to the leaders. Again, it syncs up with what is the most important call to action for that particular moment within this campaign. I'm going to go back to the slide. The other thing too is that everything is kind of changing. So as we're getting further into this budget process, as like the one house budgets are coming through, there's going to be different calls to action that are coming through from this coalition. So please, like, feel free to follow SWIM on Twitter and Facebook, because we're going to be sharing those actions out too. So whether it's a call to action for you to take, or if it's a message for you to retweet, like, keep a lookout on that, because we're going to be, as all of this stuff really picks up and we're reacting to what's coming out from the state, we're going to be talking through this stuff and like pointing you all in the direction of how you can amplify these messages and how you can act. There are many people here who are part of different organizations. If you feel like this syncs up with your personal organization that you're working with, there's still time to join this coalition, like this coalition that Nick and I are a part of. So there's a sign-on page for that as well, that you can, put in the chat. There are weekly meetings that Nick and I attend, and if you sign on as a coalition member, you are welcome to come to these meetings. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every person from your group needs to participate. As an example, I'm the one that attends these meetings for Staten Island Women Who March. And these emails that are here, these are the folks that, set out the meeting invites, set out the agenda for those weekly meetings as far as like touching base on this. And I think an important thing to mention too is that as this shifts, and even after the budget is passed, this is a coalition in general that still exists and will exist beyond this. This work is going to continue needing to be done of making sure that we're working towards a more equitable New York. So even if we're not necessarily pushing these specific bills, there's always going to be things that this group and this coalition is going to be working on to continue to create a more equitable New York. So that's all I have. That was a lot. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and maybe catch up in the chat a little bit. But are there any questions? Nick, I don't know if you want to jump in, if there's anything that I forgot to say, and if there's anything that, any questions that had come up during the chat that might be worth more discussion.
I think that I got something said for most of this. I want to emphasize, which I believe you said already, is that we approach this as a package of bills. We're not prioritizing any one of these bills. We're saying New York State needs a ton of money, and this is a way to get it. Because, and we are not earmarking any of the bills. In the past, one of the things that the governor has done is to play groups off one another. Well, I can give you some money for education, but that means, we got less to spend on hospital beds or whatever, on Medicaid. At this point, we know that in order to prosper in the way that we know New York can prosper, we're going to need a lot of money. So we're asking for a lot of money. We're going to the place where the money is, because the very wealthy, we're not trying to punish the very wealthy. We're trying to say, we're all in this together. We need you to, to step up and do what you can do. We're all doing what we can do. We need you to step up and do what you can do. We also know, especially as we're getting very close to the actual budget negotiations, that we're not going to get everything we want. Maybe we will. That'd be fantastic. We could all retire. Stephanie, you and I could retire, in 2 or 3 weeks. The one house budgets, convince the governor that all of the things that he's been doing wrong. He sees the error of his ways, and he says, okay, we're going to tax the rich. And we're going to tax them, in the way that you talk about, not the way I talk about. We know we know that this is a marathon, not a sprint. We are going to be going after this. We change our approach. In the last couple of years, we had been saying we had about 14 bills that we were pushing, saying every one of these raises revenue, and we didn't get any of them. This time, we know we're concentrating on the ones that make money. There are plenty of other things that are wrong with tax structure in New York. That we can fix when we have a little more time. We can get rid of the tax exemption that went in for people who buy yachts and private planes. the governor in his wisdom managed to get it so that the sales tax on yachts and private planes was eliminated. I pay sales tax on everything. So, but it doesn't make much difference in terms of revenue raising. But these bills do. Every one of these bills is specifically made so that it raises a lot of money. So we're pushing all 6 of them, but we're not going to get them. And we know that. So this is the beginning, this is just the first stages of a very long campaign that's going to take us. And I'm going to stop talking because this is Stephanie's meeting, not mine.
This is all of our meeting.
No, if I keep going, you'll see the steam coming out of my ears.
I also think I think a question popped up in the chat, like I was kind of skimming through as you were doing this, but all of these bills do have numbers assigned to them in both the Senate and the Assembly. They've all been introduced on the floor. And many of them do have, I think all of them have some sponsors, both from the Senate and Assembly.
No, they all have significant sponsors in both the Assembly and in the Senate. I can in the Senate, they all have 20, 21, 20, 18, 19 senators signed on in the Assembly, which of course has almost 3 times as many members. It's got an awful lot more people signed on to the different bills. It has very significant support in the membership in each house.
Yeah, and I think too, I don't know if this question is going to come up, but currently I don't believe any of our Staten Island representatives are sponsors of these. I have called, I put in calls to Senator Savino's office, Assemblyman Cusick and Assemblyman Fall this past week. I haven't heard back from all of them. I did hear back from Cusick's office. They wanted some more information, so I have to follow up and send them some more information. But that's kind of where we are at this point.
Charles Fall is on board for the
I'm sorry, what's that, Neil?
Charles Fall is on board for the tax the rich.
Yes, I don't know if he's on for this specific package though. Unless you might know better than I do.
Yeah, I haven't checked very recently, but Charles Fall, as of several days ago, had not yet signed on as a co-sponsor. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. People sign on and not, for their own reasons.
Yeah, and I do with Assemblyman Fall specifically at his town hall that he had maybe about a month or so ago. I did bring this up on that call. And he did talk about some of the bills. Again, at that point, I don't think all of these bills had been introduced and been given numbers and everything like that. But I do agree with you, Neil. Like, I think he is somebody that can be pushed for this because he's supported like a stock transfer tax. Like, he's supported bills that would increase the taxes on the wealthy in this state. So I do think there is potential movement and partnership there. Yep.
That goes to a question. I know when you're ready, but that's why I'm saying tax the rich and independent bills, and that you're earmarking it as a package. I got that. If Jersey passed that bill to tax the rich, and do you use that as a reference to maybe, know that bill can get passed? Are you looking at Jersey in any kind of way to use it as a reference?
New Jersey just raised taxes by a significant amount on people making $1 million or more, but that's pretty much what I know about it.
Sally, I see that you put, what kind of opposition are we running into on these bills? So really, like the past year and stuff, a lot of it's been like waiting to see what the federal government's going to do. And I know that the COVID relief bill did just get passed. But I think an important thing to note with that, because I feel like that could be opposition that we start to get, especially now that it passed, is that not everything in that bill was annual revenue. And that's a really important thing to note with all of this. Some of that was, a one-time, specifically money that's coming to the state. It's not necessarily annual revenue that we would be getting from that bill. So I think it's important to, when we have this opposition, to be aware of that when talking with legislators. Nick, I don't know if you have any more insight.
Well, I'm agreeing with you, Stephanie. You know, this is the federal thing is pretty much a one-time thing, and it is. Let's not, you know, be afraid to say that this is enormously helpful right this minute, but it does not answer the systemic shortfall that New York is facing. We're just going to put it off, if nothing else. And we were facing shortfalls long before the pandemic, you know, hit us. It just made it a lot more obvious.
You know, it's funny because we were talking to, I'm part of Vocal New York, and part of the conversation was the fact that they might want to do the marijuana bill as opposed against the tax the rich bill. So they were using long-term marijuana, you know, I mean, it just was amazing. The conversation is the reason why they want to pass the marijuana, but they don't want to pass the tax to the rich because they feel the marijuana, you know, like we're going to fall that okie doke. But that was a conversation that was generated.
Yeah, the marijuana bill is long overdue for lots of reasons, but in terms of revenue raising, it is not in the category that some of the bills that we're presenting here are. Well, that's where I'm going to stop. Otherwise, we get into a long social discussion about, you know, the efficacy of, you know, legalizing marijuana. I think since I see that from Richenda, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. While I think that police and firefighters and sanitation members are reasonably well paid, none of them falls in the category of the people we are going after. If you noted in the graph that Stephanie showed you earlier, you don't start to see, even with our progressive income tax, you don't start to see anything that changes for people, causes them to have a larger tax bill until you start to earn $400,000 more. And even at the $400,000 level, you'd be paying about $650 more than you are paying right now. These bills are aimed at going where the money is. And while I'd like to make $300,000 or $400,000, that would be great. But yeah, at $400,000, you pay about $650 more in taxes. It does go up, and it goes up faster the further along you get. But you have to consider what the real life, you know, effect is. You have a $1.5 million income. While $11,750 is, you know, a chunk of money, it has a real life effect that's far less than the person who's earning, you know, $60,000 a year, which is, I believe, the average income of all New Yorkers, individual income.
Are there any other questions? I'm checking the chat again. What groups on Staten Island are part of the IONY coalition? The groups that you listed are the ones that I know of right now. We're still trying to build this coalition, so I don't know if we have representatives from other organizations here today that maybe haven't had a chance to dive in yet on some of the information that has come their way. So hopefully maybe we'll get more after this meeting.
One of the things that you all need to understand is that over the past year, what used to be called Budget Justice and is now called the Invest in Our New York coalition has been making a really large effort to make sure that we are not just a New York City centric organization. We have been reaching out and successfully reaching out to groups, progressive groups all over all over New York State. And the fact that you see progressive legislators being elected in places like Rochester and Syracuse and Buffalo, and further up the Hudson Valley is, I would like to think, is in part directly because people like us have been reaching out, and people are, there are progressive people all over New York State. This is not an upstate, downstate fight. This is a fight for every New Yorker. The Rochester school system last year ran out of money before the end of the school year. It took a special appropriation in last year's budget to get them money to get themselves through the rest of the school year. And of course, then the pandemic hit. The Rochester City Schools reopened about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that nice free lunch that goes to many inner city kids. I have a picture in my set of slides for the presentation that shows that free lunch on that first day was a carton of milk, a pear, some cheese Twizzlers, like cheese doodles, and a stick of what amounts to turkey jerky. And that's not what I think people should be having for that free lunch that contributes so much to children's nutrition all across the state.
There were questions in the chat, and Nick, I don't know if you want to take this one too, of what are Hasty and Cousins' positions currently?
Both Carl Hasty and Andrea Stewart Cousins have moved considerably over the last year. And again, this is I believe, in large part because so many people are starting to say, listen, guys, we're in a big hole, and we're not going to get out of it by slashing services. It's only going to get worse if that's our only response, to this crisis. We need to raise money. We need to raise income. The governor has been very adamantly against this, but the two leaders have been moving forward in a more progressive direction. I saw one other question, which is, why wouldn't the very wealthy just move to another state? It is true that occasionally wealthy people leave New York City, and I'm saying New York City because basically that's where the richest people in the state tend to live. At a meeting I was at the other day with upstate rural things, they were saying, in their county, $200,000 is considered, income is considered wealthy. And in New York City, $200,000 is, for some people, just getting on. So the research shows that the wealthy live where they want to live, and they live here in New York because they want to be in New York. It is a very, very small percentage of people who move specifically for tax reasons and actually for any other reasons. It looked a little like it over the summer when we saw the very wealthy moving to their places in the Berkshires or further out on Long Island. But as the winter came along, they started to move back. You don't want to live in Montauk in the winter. It's awful out there. So we're not particularly worried about the wealthy leaving. There may be a few that do, and the research shows that overall the income, the tax income is greater as a result of raising taxes on the richest. There are also many millionaires who actually say we're being undertaxed. They recognize their responsibility, for living where they live. So.
Yeah, and I think Vanessa too, you mentioned in the chat how it doesn't happen as much as it's been fear-mongered to happen. Like this is it's a argument that's used to try and dissuade this, saying that the wealthy are going to move. Like there's not any significant kind of like historical precedents for that happening.
The threat of the New York Stock Exchange threatening to move out of New York City This question usually comes up in response to the financial transaction tax that we talked about earlier. New York had a financial transaction. In its case, it was only stocks because 100 years ago, stocks were the only financial vehicles. But from 1905 on up until about 1980, there was a stock transfer tax in New York State. Nobody moved. When it was first instituted in the New York Times, they were saying, oh, the stock exchange is going to move, the stock exchange is going to move. It didn't move. And about 6 months afterwards, they said, this tax is doing pretty well. We're getting a lot of income that, New York State needs. What we are asking for in this financial transactions tax is on stocks, the tax is roughly 0.5%. The tax that you pay in New York City on your candy bar is 8.75%. And as I said before, I pay sales tax on practically everything. Why should the sale of stocks, be exempt from that? The way the bill is structured as well has provision for that sort of thing. If you have what they call a nexus to New York, I get it going too much, I know, but if you have a nexus to New York, that is, if your broker, if the exchange, if the buyer, if the seller, any of them have a connection to New York, then the tax is collectible in the same way that when you buy something on Amazon, you're going to be paying New York State sales tax on that item because the tax has to do with where it goes, not where it comes from. In the same sort of way. I can go on this forever. You'll start to see that steam coming out of my ears. It also, the financial transactions tax is also largely aimed at curbing the volatility. This is on the trades that are happening, and over the last 15, 20 years, the way stocks are traded on the stock exchange has, in many cases, changed quite a bit, so that the vast number are now done on fast. I can't remember what the acronym is. It's fast high trades. These are the day traders who buy a stock, wait for it to go up, 0.2% and sell it. And the institutional stockholders tend to keep their stocks for the long run. That is those big holders in pension funds and retirement funds of various sorts. I'll shut up now.
Are there any more questions? Joanna, was your question answered about the stock exchange? Would it affect these bills?
Yeah, that was really helpful, Nick.
Thank you.
Charlotte, I see your question. If the package of bills is passed, would we need to stop working on the federal level to move money from military spending? I don't think so. I think we keep doing everything on both a state and federal level. I think it's important to keep pushing wherever we can. That's just kind of my personal opinion.
Can I just jump in what Charlotte is talking about? I think a lot of people on the call know this, but Peace Action is involved in a coalition called Move the Money New York City. And it's on a city level, not state level, a resolution in New York City Council that has 19 council members plus Jumaane Williams, the public advocate, co-sponsoring, that calls on Congress to move the money from Pentagon spending, because the city relies on federal help. It needs money, just like the state needs money. And $740 billion was spent in the current fiscal year on military, and they're just a 10% cut, a moderate cut to that would help the city and the state enormously. So we're pushing hard on that. At the city level, we try to get something at the state level. They're very, very hard to get that type of resolution through the state legislature right now. But, and we push on our congressional delegation. We got to keep educating people about $740 billion. That is more than, it's almost 60% of the discretionary spending of our tax dollars goes to the military. New Yorkers pay $30 billion a year for the military. So I agree with you, Stephanie.
Maureen, did you have a
I
question?
had a question. At the beginning of your presentation, you said something about 2.2 million New Yorkers are unemployed. And I didn't know if you were, or maybe you said even newly unemployed, but I don't know if you were talking about 2.2 New York City New Yorkers or 2.2 New York State New Yorkers, because 2.2 New York City New Yorkers certainly sounds like a pretty high number of unemployed people.
Yeah, I believe that was a stat that was representative of the state. Nick, I don't know if you.
I think that is too, and I think the real thing is that that over the course of the pandemic, there have been, as we know, many, the unemployment has gone up, it's gone down, but there are many people who've either lost their jobs and are now getting by with doing other things, so that they're either unemployed or underemployed in there. And of course, that tends to fall hardest on the people furthest down the the economy chain. The richest of New Yorkers, the billionaires in New Yorkers, the 120 billionaires. Oh, by the way, there were only 112 of them at the beginning of the pandemic. There are now 120. Some people say 121, but their collective, as you said earlier, their collective income has gone up $87 billion, and that's just in the last year. That's why we say there is more than enough money in New York State to fill the hole that we're in and to make us prosper. Our motto, in the earlier versions of this was, imagine a state where we all could prosper. Let's see. For most people who have 401ks and other forms of savings, it would not, because if you're talking about capital gains taxes versus income taxes, almost all of those forms of retirement income pay out in as ordinary income. So whatever happens internally is irrelevant to you as an individual. I don't think, other than they probably know about Elizabeth Warren's bills and she knows about ours, there is no direct connection. They could donate that $87 billion to New York State, but I'm not holding my breath.
And I know it was maybe a little bit of a joke, Sally, too, but I'm going to keep hitting home the point that these bills would raise revenue annually. So, I mean, it would be nice. So. Are there any more thoughts, questions, concerns about these bills or about the action? Sally, thank you. What are we going to do here on Staten Island? So as I mentioned when I was talking through the calls to action slide, We're kind of in a moment right now, just because we're in this weird middle ground of like the one house budget resolution sort of coming out of what the next move is going to be. So I'm going to post again here in the chat, just some of the things that I know that we can currently do. And we're going to be continuing to get information from the coalition itself about any particular action. So things that we can do here on Staten Island right now, the sign the petition, if this was something that you were interested in supporting, and share it with friends, like tell your friends about this package of bills too. The step number 2 of like calling and emailing state reps and the leaders, that take action page, and that slide that I showed you, which is the link for that says like P2A, that's the slide that I showed you that had the email, call, tweet, and where it pre-populates like a message for you to send or provides a script for you and connects you directly to your representative to call. Those are things that we as individuals can all do right now, until we get kind of more action about what the Border Coalition is doing. There's a couple of things that are coming up, but I don't have fully all of the information. So this is where you can follow Swim on Facebook and on Twitter, because we will be sharing some more of this information as it comes out. Make the Road, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but Make the Road is working, is organizing a hunger strike over the next like week or so. And there's different ways that folks would be able to participate. I don't have all of that information to share right now. Again, so just like stay tuned to Swim to see how you might be able to support that. One of the things that I didn't highlight too much in this presentation, but these package of bills are really pushing to also support and protect workers that have been excluded from, previous relief bills and things like that, undocumented folks and things like that. So Make the Road is making sure that in anything that comes out, that we are not forgetting about that group of workers here who contribute, who pay taxes, and don't get the same support back. So stay tuned for information more on that hunger strike that's happening. There's also going to be an Albany Day of Action that's happening on March 23rd. Again, I don't have all of the final information for that, but so like stay tuned to Swim for more information on ways that you can get involved there.
Do you know if the bills weren't presented this year, what would happen to the bill if the bill didn't go before the
If they didn't get to the floor for a vote, is that what you're?
Yes.
I mean, that's a great question. I think the big takeaway here is that like the work of this coalition is going to continue. So if they don't get voted on this year, if they somehow change and morph into other bills that provide some of the same support, as a coalition, we're going to continue working to keep pushing for bills like this or these specific bills to come up for votes and to push our leaders to support them and to be vocal supporters of them as well.
Because,
yeah.
Because it seems to me that these are common sense bills,
Mhm.
but we've been fighting these bills for so long, and we know along racial lines and different Robin Hood mentality. So I know you have the Democratic supermajority, and I got that.
Mhm.
But I'm really trying to lean on Black leadership. I'm being honest about this because
Yeah.
they've always asked for the opportunity to elevate. And I think this is the ample opportunity for them to do that. But I do think that Hasty and Cousins have to have pressure put on them to know that they can make a difference.
Mhm.
So my attack has been to, well, you have leadership now. What are we going to do? So, this is where I'm coming from on this. But
Yeah.
Well, that just, emphasizes that, one of your direct actions that you can take this afternoon is to call Andrea Stewart Cousins' office and call Carl Hasty's office and call the governor's office. He's not going to listen to you, but you can call and say, we're dying out here. We need your help. Pass these bills. This will help to save New York State. And frankly, if we don't do anything, if we don't seize the moment we're going to be in a lot of deep doo-doo, as they say, because there really isn't a plan B. If you don't raise the money, then services are going to be slashed even further than they have been.
I like that. There's no plan B.
No plan B. So, pressure everybody you can, and at this point you've only got a few days to push, because in theory by April 1st, we're supposed to have a budget, and the governor has outsized power in the budget process. We're looking to do something about that as well, but that's not going to happen. That's not going to start to happen until after we get through this. There's only so much that the coalition can do at any one time.
Don't you think that the weakness of Cuomo at this time means that, and that so many of the Democrats are prepared to impeach him, that certainly are calling for his resignation, that it means politically he's going to be much weaker this year, and with any luck he'll stop bringing bills to the floor the way he has been doing the last 2 years, like the health bill, the Medicare for All, the HALT bill, and other bills. He's just stopped them coming to the floor. And don't you think that more people are going to be prepared to vote against him now?
Well, he certainly hasn't made many friends.
Yeah, and I think you're right too. I think that, I'm not trying to assume what's happening in the leader's head. I think it's a combination of things that have pushed them to move a little bit more. I think the work of this coalition, the work of different advocates and grassroots organizations, I think definitely played a major part in it. But I also think that this is a moment to continue to put pressure on Cuomo as well, and there's a little bit more availability to do so.
I will speak to the last question. There is absolutely not only nothing wrong, there's everything right to pressure the federal government to reduce military spending. But the federal government is responsible for all of the states, and which is why New York State is not getting $1.9 trillion. The 50 states are getting $1.9 trillion. We're going to get, I don't remember what the number is, 12 billion?
Yeah, I think that's what was
billion,
mentioned.
somewhere in that, in that area, direct aid to New York State. So in New York State, we need, just as every other state is doing and needs to do, we need to take responsibility for ourselves, for our ongoing, that's what we do. New York State has needs that it needs to fund, and the problem has been that it has not been funding them all along. The governor's approach has always been, in good times you cut taxes for the rich, and in bad times you slash services for the not so rich. The very wealthy do not have to depend on Medicaid. The very wealthy do not have to depend on housing vouchers. The very wealthy do not have to depend on, on all of the other things, so many other things that, the more ordinary New Yorkers, do have to depend on. We're asking for the help from the wealthy because we are all in this together. So by no means stop, going to the feds and saying, reduce military spending. That'll give them more money to spend on everything else that they ought to be spending it on. But we in New York State per se can't depend on that. That has to be an action of the federal government. And man, I hope you're successful for all sorts of reasons. I'm an old pacifist, and so I believe in getting less military spending and more social service spending.
Well, Stephanie, I think we have time maybe for a couple of questions, and then we'll kind of bring the program to a close. Are there any more questions?
And I'll put my email in the chat again too. So if anybody thinks of questions that they didn't get to ask here, or wants to reach out to me about anything else regarding this budget coalition or swim in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
I want to thank you, Stephanie and Nick, for this wonderful presentation. We appreciate the work you're doing, and you know, we just really support you in this, and we want to do whatever we can. So come back again, let us know what the progress is, and keep us informed. And we'll certainly support you in any way that we can. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And really, again, thank you for welcoming us to this space to take over your March meeting. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure. So glad we were able to do it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having us.
Like I said, our pleasure, Nick. Thank you.
I just want to put a plug in. I put in the chat the website for Peace Action of Staten Island, peacesi.org. We invite everyone to go there and join as a member.
Well, thank you again, everybody. And have a wonderful afternoon, and mark your calendar for April 17th for our next meeting. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Thank you, Stephanie and Nick. Thank you.
Bye.